record. Yeah. Okay. I'm smarter than I look, guys. Okay. So Python. They say Python is the hardest stack. And I would say that's probably going to be because of OOP, which is object-oriented programming. It's, in my experience, OOP is just one of those things that humans just aren't good at. It's hard to wrap your head around. It's kind of a weird concept. We're making like actual things, but they're in our programs. So I want to start with the flipped classroom idea. So today it's not that big of a deal because we're just reviewing most of the concepts we learn in JavaScript and just how it works in Python. Tomorrow, when we get into OOP, I strongly encourage and humbly ask that everyone do the reading for tonight before you go to sleep. Okay, so studies show that when you read before you go to sleep, your mind absorbs it better. So even if it's not crystal clear, read through it, maybe try some of the exercises because the difficulty steps up a little bit tomorrow. So today I'm just gonna quickly go through this because you guys have already heard this. So flipped classroom just means ideally you should be going through the material at least once on your own before class, preferably the night before. Rules and requirements, we've been through this last time, so I know I'm just gonna say the rules: be present, be humble, be courteous, strength through struggle, but don't struggle too much, right? Remember the 20-minute rule. And 20 minutes is, if you want to put in a little more time, that's fine, but don't spend 2 hours trying to get through an exercise. If you're struggling, please reach out to me or Ed. So zero tolerance for disrespect, negative attitude, dishonesty. So, I think we've been through that. Exams, this exam is where you have the first chance to earn a red belt or a black belt. So we're going to do the red belt first. If you complete the red belt, then you go on for a black belt if you choose to do so. This exam is pretty tough. Okay, so try to be here, try to be present, try to ask questions because it is a little bit on the challenging side. Academic honesty, I don't know why anybody would cheat in this situation. Jesse, what's up?
The exam for this, is that the same exam that we saw on Friday from the feature class?
So, okay, good question. So that wasn't the exam, that was the projects they worked on after they took the exam. So the exam we do is basically like, it's more similar to what you did in Web Fundamentals. It's like, I show you a wireframe, you build the wireframe. You're not going to worry too much about the styling and making it pretty, but you're going to get the functionality right. You're going to make sure that everything works, right? So,
oh, okay.
Yeah. So that part, the project is supposed to be more fun and relaxing and not as high stress, right? So the project is just your idea. So that I would suggest everybody start thinking about a project, start thinking about ideas, but don't put too much into coming up with the best idea that anybody's ever seen. Yeah, you're not going to make the next Twitter during your boot camp. So just come up with something. If you want to make a to-do list, right? It's better to have some sort of project that you can show employers than to have nothing, right? Or to have, one project that is half complete. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, so academic honesty. Again, I don't think we need to go into this. Just do your own work. Don't cheat. And then the surveys. Do they have a survey every day? I don't know. Is it just the chapter surveys they do? Yeah. Okay, so the chapter surveys. I would love your feedback. I'm new to Coding Dojo. I've taught before, but I'm new to Coding Dojo, so I would love to hear your input, your feedback on me. I'm trying to, I always want to do the best I can. So, and being new, your feedback would be very helpful. Just please make it constructive and be gentle because I am fragile. I'm just kidding, but anyway. Okay, so fundamentals. Any questions about, I kind of went over that fast. I'm sure you guys, no questions about the administrative stuff. You know, you're not supposed to cheat, you know, you're supposed to be here and all that stuff. Okay. All right, so in my repository, I have day one. So I have the algos file. There's a day one file on there. So don't confuse the two. That's day one algos. I have the day one is our day one for this lecture. So today we're going to cover this. So I want to get through as much as I can. I want to try to get at least up to the assignments, but we'll see how it goes. I've never done this before, so I don't know how far I'm going to get, but we'll see how far I get in the first hour. We'll take our break and then we'll finish up at the end at 3 p.m. Also, before I forget, have a secondary job with Coding Dojo that I still have to fulfill. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to have my lecture at 2 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. So I'll remind you those days, but so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the afternoon lecture will be at 3 p.m. Tuesday, Thursday will be at 2 p.m. It'll be an hour ahead. Okay. And I'll remind you every day because I know that would screw me up. So I'll tell you at the end what time to be back. Okay, so this, I want to show you guys how to write Markdown. The Markdown is basically when you have a README file in your repo, the Markdown is what shows up in the repository. So if we go to my GitHub, and if you go to our repository, so all of this stuff is written in Markdown. And I think Markdown is kind of a cool way to take notes. So I want to give you this tool. And so I'm going to take my notes or give my lecture in Markdown and just give you guys pointers on how it works. So this is, so this is a Markdown file. So if I close this up and I open up the preview, you can see that all of this converts to this when it's compiled or when it displays on GitHub. So I'm going to use this to take notes. If you want to follow along, there's an extension I use. It's called, I think it's a Markdown all-in-one. Let me just search it. Yeah, so the Markdown all-in-one, that'll auto format it for you. So if you want to, I mean, this is just, again, these notes will be available to you at the end. All right, so course overview. I don't have anything there. There it is, oops. So let's start with an introduction to Python. So Python, and just so you know, if you want to make a heading, just the single hashtag will make a primary heading. If I wanted to add a secondary heading, I would do 2 hashtags. Oh my gosh. Right. If you want to do bullet points, you just do a dash. So and then for code snippets, you just do these 3 backticks. The backtick key is right above the tab key next to the number 1 on your keyboard. So 3 of these, and then you specify the language, it'll format the code to look like this in your notes. So Python, the reason we teach Python is it's an incredibly popular language. It's exploded in popularity over the last couple of years. Having the comparison between JavaScript and Python, I think, helps cement the concepts, the programming concepts we're teaching, because every programming language at the end of the day does pretty much the same thing. You create arrays, you create associative arrays. And so having Python as a comparison to JavaScript, I think will help cement that. Python is also, it's considered a batteries included language, meaning that if you go to the Python standard library, and this comes with every Python, every time you install Python, you get access to all of these libraries. So basically anything you can think of, chances are there's a library that's in existence that you can use. So like calendar information, date, time, there's all the different math libraries. So we're not going to use all of these, but we will make use of several of them as we go along. So this is when they say, you know, Python is batteries included, that means that all of this stuff is basically here for you if you need it. It'll send email for you. So again, we'll get into some of this, but let's see. So it was in the community, it was invented by or written by this guy. He's a Dutch programmer. His name's Guido van Rossum. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But I just wanted to show you guys his website. So he's like a superstar, like computer programmer, like a rock star in programming, and this is his website. And that seems to be like the pattern, like the bigger, cooler guy you are in computer science, the crappier your website. So I don't know, that's like Larry Wall is the inventor of Perl. And his website's just terrible. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that I'm thinking that I'm going to make myself a website that looks really crappy so I can be cool too. But anyway,
They're just, you know, they're stuck in the 90s.
Well, I think it's like if you ever known a contractor, like their house is always all torn up and looks crappy, and they're like in the middle of a project. So I think these guys, it's like, yeah, that looks like
I don't got anything to prove at this point.
Right. So anyway, Python is also, if you don't want to pursue web development, it's used in just about anything. So scientific computing, data analysis, machine learning, basically it's a multi-paradigm language. So if you want to do object-oriented programming, functional programming, it's very versatile. And then finally, the versions, make sure you're not using version 2.7. Okay, so as long as you have a version that's after like 3.6, you're fine. But make sure that when you type Python into your compiler or into your, so if I come in here and I say Python, it should, so I have 3.10, but make sure that it's not in anything that says 2 or 2.7. Cool. Any questions so far? All right. So getting back to, okay, so we did the overview. We did it by Python. Everybody has it installed, right? I think we did this on Friday. Does anybody not have Python working? Okay, so if you do, see me afterwards and we'll get it working. So it's going to be a little bit different between Windows and Mac. But yeah, as long as you have some installation working, it'll be fine. Git bash, I want to encourage everyone to use the terminal. I see when a lot of you, when you're running programs, you're clicking the little run button. So I want you to get comfortable using the terminal. And I'll go, as I'm going through the lecture, I'll explain how to use that. But we're gonna, when we get to Flask, we're gonna be making heavy use of the terminal. So I want you guys to sort of get used to that. Just play around with it and get more comfortable with the terminal. And if anybody's having issues, we'll go into some of the nuances of it. Okay. So the first practice lesson is organizing files. So you want to basically create your file structure to look something like this. Organization is very important. If your files are like all over the place, it's going to be much more difficult to navigate and understand like where things are. So use this file structure. So create a overarching file called Python, and then each of these are the separate chapters that we're going to go through. So we're starting with fundamentals. If you go to my repository, let me save. There we go. Organize it. So if you click here, I've written a script that will do it for you. So if you want to use that, you can. Just to show you how this works, I have the README file set up. So if I open up the preview, so this heading right here corresponds to this heading. I have the image here, and then I have my script. So there's a link to the script here. Now, just to demonstrate running a script, if I right click the folder that holds my Python file, okay, so if I right click organizing files, this will open up and it says open in integrated terminal. Okay, so again, if I right click, this comes up, and if you click open in integrated terminal, it will automatically open up in the right directory. Okay, so if I come down here, ls is short for list. So as long as you're using PowerShell, ls will work. If you're using the command prompt, it won't. But if you're using the bash shell, it will. Just don't use command prompt, I guess. But PowerShell works. So that shows when I do ls, it shows me everything that's in the directory that I'm in. Okay, so everything in this directory will list right here. So I have to be in the same directory to get the command to work. So if I type Python main, and if I just type the first letter, if there's only one file in this directory with an M that starts with an M, I can just hit the tab key and it will automatically complete for me. Okay, so if I run this file, it automatically makes the file structure that's here. Okay, so if you want to use that, you can. You don't have to. You can make them manually. But basically, you want it to look like this. You want a Python file. You should have a subdirectory for Ajax, a subdirectory for Flask, Flask MySQL. And so everything that we're doing should go in this fundamentals folder. Okay.
Yeah, so can you open the folders? Because the picture looks like folders and then files.
Right. These, so it looks like that, but these are all directories, or all folders.
Okay.
Okay. So I know it looks like the sub. So Python is a directory, and inside that directory we have Ajax, and inside the Ajax directory we have Ajax API.
So
Okay.
Ajax API folder, Ajax Flask folder. Okay.
Exactly. And then the files would go inside here. So if I wanted to put something in my fundamentals, I would say right click it and say new file. And this would be, I don't know, Python practice.py. Okay, so that would be basically what I'm doing here is I'm going to this fundamentals folder and putting a file inside of it.
Okay.
Any questions about this? Or anything? Okay. So moving on. So we have running Python testing. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, just real quick, you said we're doing everything in the fundamentals. So you're just talking about like what we're doing right now, right? For lectures and stuff?
Yeah, so for lectures, I've structured it a little bit differently, but when you're doing like the assignments, you're going to put like, so the first one, that's testing Python. So if you, to get this, I'll just do this one. We'll do this because we're here. So they want you to run this file using a bash window. So you're going to basically click here. This is the Python code that we're going to put in the file. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. And then if I go back to my file structure, inside of the fundamentals folder, I will make a new file. What do they call it? Testing Python. Okay, so now I have, let me close some of this stuff. So now I have my testing Python file inside of the fundamentals folder.
Okay.
Okay. So now I can just paste in the code here. And make sure I save my file. So now if I want to run this file, if I were to just say Python testing Python right down here, and I can see I'm in the wrong directory because I'm hitting tab and nothing's happening. Okay, so if you don't want to navigate through the file system, what you can do is just close this terminal. And by the way, when you exit, when you click the X, it just closes it and basically closes the window. But it's still there. If you want to completely destroy this terminal and open a new one fresh, you click the trash can. So trash can kills it, throws it away. X just gets it out of the way. It's still there. It's just kind of running in the background. So I'm going to throw this away. Now, if I go to fundamentals, I hover over it and I right click it. And again, I say open an integrated terminal. It'll automatically put me in the right place to run the file. Okay, so I can double check by typing ls and I see all the directories that are in there. I have my Python practice, which doesn't have anything in it. And I have testing Python, which is the file that I want to run. Okay, so to run the file, I type Python. And since there's only one file in here that starts with a T, I can just type the T and tab. And then when I hit enter, it'll run the file and it executes all the code that's inside here. Okay, did I do that too fast? Does anybody want to see it again?
And is it Python 3 for Mac users or is it just Python?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. So Python 3 for Mac users, because if you do Python, it'll open it in Python 2, and I doubt it'll work. Okay, so any questions? Cool. Okay, so getting back to, so we did testing Python. So now we're getting into the fundamentals. So this recognizing Python assignment is optional. And I found it very confusing. Or I could see that you guys might find it confusing. So try it, but if you can't complete it, don't freak out. Okay, because it's a little, I think it needs to be revised because there's some things missing.
I'm glad
let's
I'm not
get
the
into-
only one.
Did you try it?
I downloaded the files that it needed, that it wanted us to download, and then I was like, what is going on?
Yeah. So if you don't waste too much or don't spend too much time working on that one. The other ones we definitely want to do, like the for loops. But if it's optional, I'll tell you when the optional assignment is more crucial. Okay, this one I think if you can't get it completely, don't worry about it. Okay, Python syntax. So I'm gonna try to show these side by side. Let's see if I can do that. I don't think I have enough room. I'll just do it this way. Okay, so Python syntax. And I'm going to make a file. So the README file is where we're going to take notes. And I'm going to make a separate file that we're just going to use so I can actually do the code demonstration. So I'm going to make a new file. So again, I'm clicking on the directory where I want to make the file, which is in Python syntax. I'm going to say new file, and I'm just going to call it demo.py. Okay, so now we're just going to talk a little bit about Python syntax. So indentation and line endings. Let me make another file real fast. So we'll call this demo.js. Okay, so we'll start with the JavaScript. If I want to make a function in JavaScript, how do I do it?
DEF.
Not Python. JavaScript.
Oh, and sorry. Just put function.
You're good though. You're on top of things.
Just function
I'm sorry.
and then name. Yeah.
And so a function is the keyword we use. We can call this whatever we want. I'm going to call it func name. Right. So we put the parentheses, and what goes in the parentheses?
Parameters.
Parameters. I'm just going to call it params. And then how do we signify what goes inside the function? Like if the code that we want to include in this function, how do we do that?
No curly brackets.
Right, curly brackets. And whatever code we want to go in here. Sorry, I just spilled water all over my keyboard. So I'm just going to console.log whatever is passed in. So I'm going to say console.log params, right? And that's a function in JavaScript, right? So if I were to test this out, I would say func name, and what do I pass it? Or what is it
What?
called when I pass it something?
Argument.
Arguments. So I pass it argument, and now if I save my file, and I don't think I'm in the right place, so let me close this. So if I want to run the file, I need to be in the directory where the file lives. So I'm going to open an integrated terminal, ls, just to make sure I'm in the right place. So if I say I want to run a JavaScript file, I say node, and then the name of the file, and make sure it's demo.js. And then when I run it, I see arguments here. Okay. So in Python, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So yeah, is there a reason that you like doing that more than just like highlighting it and clicking run and stuff? Or is that just like it?
I guess maybe that's just the habit I've gotten into. And I'm trying to get you guys in that habit, because with this, we're going to be like, when we want to run our Flask application, I don't think it works the other way. I think you have to do it this way. So I want to get you guys used to using the terminal. Everybody's like afraid of the terminal at the beginning, and it's for good reason, but I want you guys to sort of get your feet wet doing this.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, so how do we do the same function in Python?
Now use DEF.
Now you use def, and same thing. We're just going to say func name. Okay, and in Python, we don't use the curly braces. We signify a code block. How?
Indentation.
Right. So we need to end our statement, the function definition, with a colon. Okay. And then anything under or that's indented under that will signify that it's part of the code block. Okay. So if I want to pass parameters, I can do the same thing and say params. And then when I hit return, it automatically lines up. It knows I'm writing Python, so it automatically puts me 4 spaces indented. Okay. So if I want to print what I pass in JavaScript, it's console log. In Python, it's just print. Okay. And then when I want to just print the params, I can spell params, params. Oh my God, what am I doing? Params. There we go. And that's the main difference. So if we compare the two, basically this is Python, this is JavaScript. I kind of like the Python better, but that's just it's a little bit easier. The curly braces can get unwieldy and difficult to see where they end and where they begin. With this, it's just written just like English, just the same way we group a paragraph together, we indent, the same thing in Python. Okay, so now if I want to run this file, or I want to execute my function, let's say func name, pass it args, and then to run it, I don't say node, I say Python. Python and demo, change the JS to Py, and it works the same way. Any questions, James?
So just to be clear, if under func name, if you were to like have multiple lines of code, as long as they're all indented one time, it'll recognize them all.
Yep. So if I say print I'm on, and then return params. As long as they're all on the same level of indentation, all of these will run when I execute the function. Okay, so just like we would if we were to put more statements in JavaScript, we just keep them inside the curly braces. Same thing with Python, except it's indentation instead of curly braces. Okay, any other questions? Tyree.
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. So if you were to indent twice, then it would be like a different, you'd need like a different function or something then? You saying? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, let's not get too crazy. I don't want to go down that road yet because the levels of indentation can get weird.
Okay.
But yes, so like if we put a for loop in here,
Mhm.
we would say we like start the for loop on this line and then indent under the for loop, which we'll get to that.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay, cool. All right, so we talked about indentation, line endings. So the keywords, a code block is basically started with a keyword and a colon. So if we define our function, if we have if-else statements, again, just like in JavaScript, we use curly braces. In Python, we're going to use the colon and indentation. Okay, same with for, while, and classes. Now, pass. Pass is basically a keyword in Python that allows us to kind of what they call stub out a function. So if I'm writing code and I'm saying, okay, I know I'm going to need a function for count, I don't know, users, right? And it's going to take a user as an argument, but I don't want to write this function right now. I want to like just sort of put it here to remind myself, hey, I need to write this function. If I just do this, right, you can see that Visual Studio Code is yelling at me. It's underlining this red. My file is red. So if I try to run this, I'm going to get an error, right? So indentation error, expected indentation block. So to avoid this, Python gives us this pass keyword that basically says, I know this isn't right. Just skip it for now, right? So we can put out, pass just lets us, if we want to define it, we know we're going to put a while loop in, but we don't know what's in the while loop yet. We can just use this pass keyword as sort of a placeholder. Okay, you never see this in production. You never use it like as part of your code, but it's just something that helps when you're developing. Any questions about that? Cool. All right, data types. So data types in Python, close this stuff. Oh, let me do this. So Python syntax, we're just going to say, if I want to make a subheading, I'll close this for now. So if I want to say indentation, one second. Oh, okay. So one thing I wanted to add, and this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense at this point, but it will as we go along. Everything in Python is an object. Okay, that probably makes zero sense at this point, but as we go along, it's going to start to make more and more sense. Okay, object, that basically means it's an object is like an object in the real world, like my cup, right? And you can't see it because of the background, but objects are like, they have properties, they have data, and they have things that they can do.
So
Okay,
it's like HTML without the CSS. It's got like built-in CSS.
Yeah, it's sort of like, it's kind of like that. It's like HTML with, it has like a form attribute, right? It has things that it can do. So yeah, it's kind of, that's a good analogy actually. It's like something that lives in our code or exists in our code that can perform actions and knows things about itself. So I know that sort of, if that doesn't make sense to you, you're a normal person. That's, it won't make sense in the beginning. Okay, so indentation. So indentation indicates which lines go with which. And then to make something bold, it's 2 asterisks goes with which code block. Okay. And so that begs the question, what is a code block? So that was, what is a code block? When we have like curly braces inside JavaScript, what does that signify?
Side of the code block.
Yes, yeah. So why do we put like, why do we have multiple lines of code in a code block? So when you're doing your algos and you have curly braces, you put all the stuff inside the curly braces. Why do you do that?
To organize it.
Okay.
It's all like
So
connected as
it's-
one function kind of thing.
To read it?
Yeah. So yeah, make it readable. So all those are right, but I would say that it's code that belongs together. And then how do we signify a code block in Python?
Indentation.
Indentation. Cool. And then we talked about the pass keyword. And to put code in, like if you want to have a keyword, if you use it, put it in the backticks, it looks like it'll stand out as if it's code. And what would you say the function of the pass keyword is?
To ignore the previous line.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, I'm just going to say it's like a placeholder.
Does that work for both? Like if you have a function and you just put the pass in the function, or a loop, and then you just put in the loop that pass, so that it'll pass the loop as well?
Yeah, exactly. So if I have, if I have a while loop, so while true pass, yeah, it'll skip over the while loop and it won't create an infinite loop. So anytime you have like a code block that, so without this, it's called a, what's it called? A hanging code block. So if this will create, this will create an error, it won't create it in the README file, but if this were a Python file, it would create an error. So if I just put the pass in there, it's basically saying, kind of keep my place for me. I'm coming back to fix this. Cool. All right, now let's go to any questions.
Is that similar to like asynchronous? Like, I promise to get back to this thing.
Oh, no, it's not as complicated as I promise. Yeah.
How did you make? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, how did you make pass all yellow like that?
Oh, so the backticks, if you put, it's the key right next to the 1.
Oh,
So anytime you want to indicate code, yeah, anytime you want to indicate code. So 3 of them means it's going to be a code block. So if I come down here and close it with 3 blocks, that'll indicate that I want it to be code. If you just have like 1 keyword, you can use these backticks for the keywords.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Chuck, what's up?
Under indentation, how did you get code block to go to the next line? It just, I put it down below it, but it still goes on my preview, it still goes past.
Oh, it's just because of the my Visual Studio Code. I had it, if I open this up, it'll be on the same line. You mean right here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you guys, again, I'll at the end of the day, I'm going to post this to GitHub so you guys will have access to it. Eric, what's up?
The learning platform doesn't show us any of this. Is this like super important to know how to do this?
It should show you. I don't think I've.
I've never seen any of this before, unless I'm on like the wrong thing.
I think he's just showing us how to use Markdown on GitHub.
Yeah, the markdown is not part of it. That's just my,
Okay, okay, cool.
yeah. But the indentation and line endings, I'm going through the platform.
Gotcha.
just-
All right.
Kind of taking notes and giving you guys the important. I mean, you shouldn't ignore what's in the platform, but this is just sort of,
Yeah, yeah. I was just
so-
curious about the markdown stuff because I've never seen that before. Yeah,
that's brand new. And if it doesn't help you, don't
I got
worry
you.
about it. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, cool. Any other questions? And if you raise your hand and I'm ignoring you, it's because I don't see it. So just unmute yourself and interrupt me. So I don't want to like leave anybody out. Okay, let's go back to, so we're on data types. Data types. Cool. Oh, don't look at that. I meant to take that out. Cool. All right. So what is how do you make a Boolean in Python? Actually, let's back up. How do you define a variable? Do I need to say var?
No.
Var, right. So it's just, you just use the bare word. So I'm going to say my Boolean or my bool equals, and how do you signify a Boolean in Python?
True, false.
True. So is it just like that?
Capital T.
Capital
Yeah.
T.
Oh,
Yeah, so Booleans in Python are capitalized just to make your life more challenging. I don't know why they do it, but that's just the syntax of Python. They're capitalized. So if I want to change this to false, so my bool, change my mind, it's not true anymore, it's false, I would just say false. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Booleans are just either true or false, yes or no, on or off. What about numbers? What are the different numbers in Python?
Ints and floats.
Yeah, ints and floats. So if I say, oops, my int is equal to 42 and my float is equal to 3.14. There's a third one they talk about, but I would just ignore it. We're not going to be dealing with complex numbers. So I would just focus on ints and floats. I don't even know what a complex number is, or I don't remember what it is. So ints and floats, JavaScript doesn't make that distinction, but Python does. In JavaScript, everything is, I think they're floats, but Python will make the distinction between a float and an int. And what about a string? String is just a string.
Yeah, string.
Yeah, so you can use single quotes, double quotes, and you could even use triple quotes, but let's just stick with double quotes. Yeah, it's my string. Okay, there's one more. So the data types, there's primitive and there's complex data types. The primitives are just like this, like your Booleans, your ints, your strings. There's one more that the platform doesn't talk about, but it's an important part of Python. It's the none type. So none is just if you don't know what a variable is supposed to hold yet, you would say like my unknown var equals, and if you don't know what it's going to be, just it's none with a capital N. So in JavaScript we have undefined and can't remember the other one. But
Null.
JavaScript
No.
has a, I'm sorry?
Null.
Null, thank you. Yeah, so we have null and undefined. In Python, it's just none.
Can you know how like in JavaScript you can just initialize with just putting the variable name? Can you do that in Python? Just by putting the variable name and
Good
just,
question. I don't think so, because let me try it.
so are you saying using the none? Well, then later on you can concatenate stuff to it and it'll add to it. Is that what you're trying to do? Like that's
Well,
what
so you
that's-
can't concatenate to none, but you could replace, like I could say right now this variable's none, but later on it may be like asking for a user's input or something like that. Then it could be, you know, my unknown could be whatever data comes through, right? So if it's like, you know, username. But if initially, if you want to set something to, I don't know yet, or because to answer your question, I don't think you can do that in Python. I don't think you can just, because there's no way to signify what it is.
Okay.
Let me
Yeah,
double
That's
check
just
though,
a
but I'm pretty sure you
placeholder.
can.
So it's just a
Yeah,
placeholder like pass.
Exactly. Cool. Any other questions about primitive data types? Okay. So in addition to primitive data types, we have complex data types, which basically we're going to go through each of these individually as we go through. So primitive data types, again, are Booleans, numbers, strings. In addition, the none type is like undefined in JavaScript. Now the composite types, we have tuples, which they don't have in JavaScript. I think they have them now, but it's a newer addition. So a tuple is basically like an array, but it can't be changed or mutated. So tuples, when you're first starting out, it's kind of like, why would we have an array that we can't mutate, right? It seems kind of counterintuitive. But tuples are used pretty heavily in Python, and they'll become more clear as to what their purpose is as we go on. In Python, a list, they just use the word list for an array. It's the same thing as an array in JavaScript. They just call them lists. So we define them the same way, square brackets. So let me just copy this. Say lists, paste. So so same as JavaScript, we create an empty list and we can add things to it as we go along. We'll go over all of the methods that are available on a list as we go forward. But a dictionary is, it's called an associative array in most other languages. Ruby calls it a hash. JavaScript, I think, you could sort of think about it as an object. It's not exactly the same, but basically you have key value pairs. So instead of defining a list with just numbered lists, you just like in JavaScript, you say, okay, the name is this. So you're associating keys and values. So it's sort of a more advanced, more user-friendly way of managing data. Okay, so those are the main composite data types that we're going to talk about. And again, we're going to start going through each of them as we go along.
So dictionaries allow strings and numbers.
Yes, dictionaries. So the key in a dictionary has to be an immutable type. So it has to be like a string, or most of the time they're going to be strings, probably 90% of the time.
Okay.
And then if we want to store the data, so like we have a person, John, age is 38, weight, and so on. So yeah, that's just a way of storing all this data about a person. So yeah, it can be numbers, strings, other dictionaries, lists, anything can be in the value side of the dictionary.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions? And again, I know I'm just sort of glossing over this, but we're going to go into more detail about each of these today. Okay. All right. So numbers, I'm going to go kind of through this a little bit quickly. The one thing is type. To determine a type of something, you just use the type function. So in JavaScript, it's type of. In Python, it's just the type function. Let's see. Yeah, so numbers. Oh, sorry, I was already open. So if I wanted to find out the type of something, I could say print type of my int. And it'll give me the type. Okay, so if I run this, I'm in the right place. Data types. Okay, so when I ran the type, it gives me this. So class int, again, this gets back to everything in Python being an object. So this just means that the integer, that this variable here is of the type class. It's an object belonging to the type, the class int. And again, if that doesn't make sense, it will. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's talk about strings. I might go a little bit over, but I just want to make sure we get through this. Okay, so strings in Python. What is this? Oops. That's weird. What am I doing wrong? There we go. Okay. All right, so strings. So I'm going to make a new file called strings.py. And I'm going to say oh, there's a bunch of okay. So in Python, so Python is, the name comes from Monty Python. So I got to use something from Monty Python for my string. So here's my string. So if I want to, add something to the end of my string, there's a couple of ways I can do it. So I can use the built-in print function in Python. Now the print function just like is similar to the console log function in JavaScript in that it takes multiple arguments. So I can say, if I come in here to my file and I say, I want to print my string, I can just say print my string. So if I run this, oops, it prints the average airspeed velocity of the maiden swallow. So if I want to add something onto this, I can say comma, something else. Okay, so now when I run this, it's going to, so this is a string, this is a string. So if I run this, it will print both strings. Okay. The print function can also take any other data type. So if I wanted to say, let's say I have age is I am, yeah, I am, and then my age. So if I say age, and then I put my age, it'll say I am 39. Okay. So that's using the print function itself. You can also concatenate strings, right? So I can say age and then age, let's see this first. It's Tyler, last equals Maxwell. Okay, so if I can print first and last, and it'll print my name. But I can also concatenate strings. So I can say full name equals first, oops, plus last. Okay, and then if I print full name, okay, I get, well, so I get without the space. So I'd have to add in a space. But in Python, this is, does anybody know what this is called? There's a fancy word for it that starts with a C.
Concatenation.
Concatenation, yeah. So what Python has is it's called interpolation. And JavaScript has it as well. But if I wanted to print out my name, but just have it be like placeholder variables, right? So I can start my string with the letter F, and that stands for format. So I can use this format string and I can say, my first name is, and then I use curly braces, and I can pass this variable directly into the string. So I could say my first name is first, my last name is last. So now if I run this, I can get my first name is Tyler, my last name is Maxwell. So anything, any variable can be substituted into this string using string interpolation. Okay, questions on this?
And that was similar for the backtick in JavaScript and the dollar.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the backtick is, it's the same basic principle. The only difference, the syntax in Python is with the F string. Now there's an older syntax you'll see before Python 3.6. It used to be dot format, and then you would pass the variables in here, first, last. And I can't remember what went in there, so let me double check. So with format, yeah, you just leave empty braces and then you put the variables in there. So here we would just take out first and last. Oops. And this works the same way. Okay, but the what I showed you before, let me just duplicate it. This is the more recent post Python 3.6 way of concatenation. So you just start the string with the F and then first and last. Okay. So the cool thing about this is if I were to say, full age equals, and if I say age plus 39, I'm sorry, yeah, that's right. If I do this and I try to print full age, what's going to happen?
Get an error
Yeah, why would I get an error?
because you can't combine a string with an integer.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to combine a string and an integer, and it says type error can only concatenate stir, not int to stir. So how would I fix this? How would I get this to work?
Put in
This
front of the
is-
39, just put str and then wrap it in parentheses.
Right, so we wrap it in parentheses and put str. This is called coercion or type conversion. So what I'm basically doing is using this str function, passing it the 39, and it's converting it to a string for me. So now when I run this, I'll no longer get the error and it prints it. Okay. But the nice thing about the string format is I can say print F, my age is, and I'll say age. So if I redefine the variable age down here, to be 39. This is my age is 39. So it converts it without, you don't need to worry about any type of conversion. You can pass in numbers, whatever, and it won't, you won't get the same error that you get with the old concatenation style, right? So you can just, this is, I think, the preferred way. You can, there's still use cases for the old string plus string, but I would say 90% of the time you're going to use the format strings. Okay. So one more thing, there's an even older way to do this. You can say, let me just duplicate it. What did I do? Okay. So I can, it's called the percent method, I guess. And this is a carryover from the C programming language. So you can just say, instead of the brackets, %s stands for string. And I'm just going to use a number just so you use a number. So %d would stand for decimal or number. And then the percent sign, and then you just pass in the variables. So I'll say first and age. And so my first name is, and say I am 39. And what did I do? First.
Oh, you got two
Oh.
variables of age.
I do, but I think it's because I left the F string in. No, I didn't, because I didn't save the file. There we go. No, what am I doing? Oh, I got to wrap these in parentheses. I was just testing you guys. There we go. So I am 39. So my name is Tyler. I am 39. So those are the three different ways to concatenate. The reason I'm showing you the older versions is, number one, you may see this in legacy code. And number two, when we get to databases, we're going to use this same older format when we're passing strings to the database. So the only way it will work is by using this older format. Okay, so that's why we're sort of exposing you to all the history of Python. Any questions?
But you're saying the one on line 14 is the preferred one, right? Where it's
Yes.
like the F.
Yes.
Well, what's
Let me
F
take-
stand for, or is that just like
F stands for format. So
format? Oh, okay.
So line 13 is sort of the, I don't know, middle way to do it. After this percentage syntax, they came up with this, just added dot format onto the end. The newer version post Python 3.6 is we just, instead of saying format at the end, we put an F before the string and pass in the actual variables. This is more modern, and other programming languages have the same syntax or similar syntax, where you just pass the variable directly into the string. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so that's it for the morning session. I was trying to hurry because I'm kind of panicked about time. So if anything is unclear, we're here, and if you have any questions, try to work through. Let me show my screen again. I'm going to stop recording.